Hey, what's going on? I've been chewing on this patch for a while, and I want to take you through what changed, why it matters, and how the game's systems are now likely to behave after the update. You say they'll unpack. There's a lot to unpack, so I'll try to keep it flowing like an actual conversation, the kind where you explain things, toss in opinions, and point out the corner cases that will either make you smile or make you rage quit a single save. The headline is short. The update rolled out a massive wave of fixes and mechanical adjustments. The sort of sweeping cleanup that tries to settle down systems that were interacting in weird or brittle ways. The developers say they fixed more than 600 bugs, and the patch explicitly calls out population demand rebalancing, HRE behavior fixes, and a broad set of situation and province improvements. That sheer number matters because it tells you they were addressing both systemic problems and tiny edge case crashes in equal measure. And that's going to ripple through the mid-game and long-term economic stability of a campaign. One of the biggest mechanical pivots in the patch touches the population simulation, the thing that underpins reclaiming manpower, production, migration, and even how certain estates or classes react to policy. The patch notes explicitly adjust pop demand for goods, which on the surface sounds like a narrowly technical change. But in practice, it affects how much food, cloth, tools, or agricultural staples different regions demand over time. That in turn reshapes market prices, which provinces produce what they export, and how much unrest you get when supply can't catch up. Practically, this means if you were used to seeing provinces demand an absurd quantity of a single commodity, that one situation where half of Iberia suddenly wants nothing but sturdy grain, that behavior should be far less extreme now. For players who spend a lot of time optimizing trade routes, building specific production provinces, or juggling famine and migration, these changes are meaningful. The patch notes and developer posts put this near the center of the update, which suggests they see population demand as a lever that can either stabilize or destabilize the entire economy, depending on how brittle the implementation is. The Holy Roman Empire mechanics also received focused attention. There were some particularly janky behaviors around the imperial actions. Things like the demand unlawful territory interaction and the way the emperor could occasionally target nonsensical provinces or spam odd demands across the map. Those behaviors could produce frankly hilarious outcomes in multiplayer and single player alike, but they also undermined diplomatic consistency. The patch tightens up these rules and makes the emperor's actions cleaner and more predictable. That's both a quality of life improvement and a balanced one. Players who relied on odd HRE quirks for diplomatic cheese will find those exploits harder to reproduce, while players who are victims of weird behavior will see more consistent outcomes. This change should make HRE politics feel less like a magic trick and more like a set of rules you can anticipate and plan around. Situations and scripted historical events got a fair bit of attention too. The patch specifically lists improvements for several large-scale historical situations: Rise of the Turks, the Hundred Years' War, the Red Turban Rebellions, and the Italian Wars. Those are events that touch multiple powers, move armies around, and cascade into geopolitics in ways that a single bug can blow up into a continent-wide mess. Fixing the small triggers, the timers, and the faction behavior in those situations reduces the chance that a historically important mid-game narrative will collapse because an AI flag never flipped or an occupation state failed to register. That helps keep the game's emergent storytelling intact. When these events behave as designed, they generate the memorable historical friction that makes a long campaign feel alive. There are a bunch of smaller but widely felt diplomatic changes that will bite during peace negotiations and subject interactions. The patch corrects cases where trust was being granted incorrectly, when provinces were ceded but not actually occupied, and it alters grant of independence logic so that subjects who joined an independence war are properly given independence together when peace terms demand it. Those sound like technicalities, but they're the precise type of micro that turns a clean peace treaty into a diplomatic disaster if left unchecked. Imagine negotiating a complex multi-front peace, and the game either accidentally rewards the wrong country or forgets to free a subject who fought for liberation. That's the kind of thing that makes diplomatic play feel random instead of strategic. The update reduces those moments of what just happened, which should make treaties and vassal management more reliable. On the community side, reaction is predictably mixed, but leaning towards relief. The forums and subreddit posts are full of players who are glad to see the stability fixes, especially after reports of crashes and certain broken AI actions in the early builds. At the same time, there are threads noting that some regions or nations feel stronger now because of how the control and capital movement fixes interacted with their existing bonuses. People have pointed at the Ottomans as an example of a power that gained a little extra momentum thanks to those changes. Community impressions like "this feels stronger, weaker" are important because they guide what strategies players will experiment with next, and the stream of anecdotal evidence suggests some opening lines and empire management tactics will shift. Expect to see replays and new opening guides crop up around those early advantages as players reevaluate power curves in light of the patch. Now let's talk about the AI, because that's where theory and practice often diverge. Major patches that rework deep systems tend to expose weaknesses in the AI. If you've ever watched an AI try to make sense of complex social systems, you know it can be clumsy. Reviews and threads highlight that, while many bugs were squashed, the AI still struggles in some edge cases, especially when it comes to long-term planning in this more people-centered simulation. That means players who are used to exploiting predictable AI behavior will still find plenty of opportunities to stay ahead, but it also means the overall geopolitical map might remain more static than historical expectation would suggest until the AI gets further tuning. In other words, while the patch improves rules and consistency, the machine that plays the game still needs work to handle the full depth of those rules well. There are technical consequences worth flagging because they affect how you manage saves and long campaigns. Big mechanical changes, especially those that touch population and province behavior, can alter save games in subtle ways. Not always catastrophically, but sometimes enough that your long-term income projections, unrest timers, or estate reactions shift when you load an older save post-patch. The official notes and community reports both hint at players deciding to restart campaigns to take advantage of the new behavior, which is a blunt but often practical response when fundamental systems receive rebalances. If you're invested in a long Ironman run, your experience could change the moment you update the game. It's one of those moments where a patch's benefits come with a "this may alter the results of your current runs" caveat. There's an important meta level to consider around balance cascades. When you adjust a core economic variable like pop demand, it doesn't just change a single tooltip. It modifies trade income, which modifies how frequently estates get content or rebellious, which changes manpower generation, which in turn influences how wars are fought and how colonies expand. These dominoes mean small numerical adjustments can have outsized strategic effects. The likely scenario is a period of rapid iteration where they watch player data, community reports, and crash logs, and then ship follow-ups. So expect more micro patches aimed at smoothing the edges. The initial update is the heavy lift, but the subsequent hotfixes refine and lock everything down. The design intent behind this update is visible. The team wants the simulation to behave like an ecosystem rather than a set of isolated calculations. That's why so many fixes cluster around population and situations. When a pop's demand is sensible, migration makes sense, craftsmen and peasants show up where they're needed, and provinces provide consistent outputs, players get to actually plan instead of constantly triaging emergent weirdness. That's the kind of design goal that turns a brittle game into a stable sandbox where long-term strategies are actually rewarding. Expect strategic planning to feel a bit more deterministic, which both reduces some emergent surprises and rewards careful, patient play. There are also UI and tooltip clarifications scattered through the notes. These are the small polish items that don't change the rules, but they change how easily you can interpret them. Better tooltips, clearer vote progress indicators for ecclesiastical or political mechanics, and corrected triggers for certain claims mean less time spent searching the wiki and more time actually choosing what to do next. In a game this deep, clarity equals competence. The less you have to guess about what a mechanic will do, the better your decisions will be. The patch hits several of those places, and while it's not glamorous, it's one of the hallmarks of a studio that's paying attention to community feedback.